Let's talk about the business of the day as it relates to theater with your hosts, Darnelle Radford and Mitch Weiss. This is The Business of Theater, a working title. Mitch, we're not going to name the podcast that. We're just not.
Well, you and I are going to disagree over and over and over again.
We'll just keep thinking. We'll just keep thinking about it. So, welcome to the Business of Theater, a working title. I'm Darnelle Radford.
I'm Mitch Weiss.
And we're about to get into it. So, Mitch, I thought, I'm always thinking about how the first episode starts, or the first episode always sounds like a huge introduction to a brand new thing. And I didn't want to do that. So we just sort of jumped right in with conversations. But now I realize we have to go back and kind of fill in some stories. So
there are enough stories we could be talking for years. So
yeah, but I thought it'd be good to talk about how we met and how the book came to be.
Okay, in which order would you like to hit that?
They're kind of all in the same thing, in the same vein. So I guess it was 2013.
Yeah, the book came out in 2015, I think.
Yeah, but we
met in 2013 at.
We met in 2013 at New York University.
I was teaching and auditing.
But my students would rather watch TV. I'm going to find something. It's mostly going to be rent. I'm going to find a way to go to
Oh,
rent
really?
every time.
Really? And there's and by the way, there's still schools. In fact, one was just announced today that are refusing to let their students do rent because, God forbid, they talk about gay people.
Oh my! Just get over yourselves. I feel like we need to be unquestionably gay out in public from now on.
Yeah, now it's a cool thing for straight people to want to talk about being gay. So here we go.
Yeah. We'll know that we have completely indoctrinated the world
except
when we
Florida.
Hear everyone say, I was a little gay. I was a little gay in college. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So we met at New York University in 2013. I had just stepped away from the fruit-themed technology company. Because scheduling is crazy. And interestingly enough, it was so overwhelming that currently they are in the process of trying to unionize that particular store. So if you have any idea of what I'm talking about, you know exactly where we are. So at the time, I was trying to figure out if I could go back in any kind of capacity and still work. And the scheduling was so inflexible. So I said, what are you here for? What did you really come to New York for? And I said, I came to New York because I wanted to extend my reach in arts and culture, particularly the performing arts. And so I did the math, and it just made sense to step away from the fruit-themed apple company,
You slipped.
Fruit-themed tech company. The fruit-themed tech company, and pursue continued education, which now comes full circle. I think a lot of people had a moment where they had to think, what is more important right now, investing in myself or
see, now you've now switched topics
again
to something
lines.
That's in the forefront of my mind. It's the time of year where I get invited to the college showcases for graduates, singers, actors, directors from all these, some MFA programs, some undergraduate, and they come to New York now that that COVID's letting them do this. Many of them are coming to New York again, and they invite casting directors and directors and producers to come see their students. And so far, I've gone to 4 in the past 2 weeks, and I have another 8 coming up. Of course, most casting directors I know now refuse to go. They are so bored. Not
Mm.
because there isn't talent, but I got the best line out of a casting director yesterday when we were at a showcase, a good one, but still worthless. Um, and I'm not going to say for what school. I don't want, because they're all in the same category. Um, and that was,
We
you
name
you
names
don't
here.
go to college to learn talent, and that's
Mm.
it. It's like, yes, you can learn skills and you can further your vocal abilities and your interpretation abilities, but it has nothing to do with your talent. The voices that were great
Did he,
were still great, and they were great when they came into the college.
did he say it in a raspy voice, indicative of 20 years of chain smoking? You can't go to school for
Oh,
talent.
and I'm telling the truth. I feel terrible for these kids. And for me, of course, they're kids. You're now in the new category.
Hmm.
You used to be a kid. Now you're not.
Yeah. Now I'm an old man.
Yeah. So what does
Say
that
it to
make
my
me,
back.
huh? Ancient, right? I'm
You're
a
a young
young
old
old
man.
man. Oh, thank you. I'll take that. Talking about the fruit flavored tech company that you come from is now a very old, ancient, futuristic tech company. They're not even in our
Yeah.
discussions anymore. You just buy the next phone and
No,
move
no.
on. Um, anyway, so there's a shame about it because a lot of these people are talented, but we are all looking for the standouts, and they tend
Mm,
to teach them all how to be the same, how
mm.
everybody can sing "Oh What a Beautiful Morning" with the same beautiful tone. Well, I want you to have a beautiful tone. I just don't care about "Oh What a Beautiful Morning," and I don't want you to sound like everyone else.
Yeah.
So
That kind of reminds me of uh, the years of going to the annual auditions where, there was here in Philadelphia, you could tell there were some companies where the artistic director shows up and that's great. But then there are other companies where it's
mhm,
interns.
yeah.
And it's like, okay, what are you looking for? How do you know? Or are you just compiling a dossier of headshots
Well,
and
and
resumes.
by the way, that's very true also, which we'll save for another discussion, of reading new plays. It's college
Hmm.
students and interns that read them for the producers. The producers don't read ever. I used to be one of those
Yeah.
people reading for them. So again, we'll get to what we suggest to people, but that's another discussion. Today, how I met Darnelle. Um,
We had a
yeah,
sidetracking conversation for a long period
right.
of time before we got to the meat and potatoes. Oh, so okay. At New York University, I think we might have been in the Woolworth
Yes, we
building
were. Good for you.
at the time. Uh, Um, so Mitch had a class called the Business of Broadway. Uh, Sounds familiar.
Not everybody knows that's the
And
title of my book, available at
the
all
title of Mitch's
retail
book.
and online shops. Get the plug in.
We've only been updating the book since 2015 on the website, but yes, the Business of Broadway. This is before the book was a
Yeah.
thing. Mitch was teaching this class, and if your class doesn't have enough people who join in the semester, then it gets tabled for the next semester. And so I was in a social media
That's
marketing
exactly right.
class.
Yeah.
Yeah, social media marketing class with
Oh,
Heidi
good for
Riedler.
you.
I think it's Heidi Riedler. Oh my god, on my LinkedIn. Um, and so I'm one of every class I was in. I was the person who could help the instructor with the technology up front. that was pretty much that was pretty much my situation. So I always sat kind of in the front and watched the instructor kind of fiddle with getting the projector running and getting their presentation up on the screen.
And by the
So
way,
it's at
I mean the students in the class, these were adults. They had great
mhm,
questions. They were relevant. They were things
yeah,
that, especially in those days, of course, now we know a lot more. We've all gotten a little more savvy tech wise, but we were
hmm,
still at the beginning of how marketing gets done over social media,
yeah,
and other
yeah,
classes like that. So the people in the class were asking some really astute questions, and you watched every teacher. I took a number of these courses as a professor because I was allowed to take them for free, and I sat there and I was learning nothing because luckily I knew more than I thought I did. But more importantly, I watched these professors hem and haw and fumble, and then they'd go, Darnell, do you have anything you can add to this? And Darnell would, without
well.
flinching, would open his mouth. And I went, well, why am I sitting in this class? I need to talk to Darnell.
And Heidi said the
Yeah.
same thing. She's like, "Oh, you have to meet Mitch." But to the credit of the students in the class, they all had interesting backgrounds.
Hmm.
Like they all came from
Very true.
previous careers, or they were currently in careers, but they wanted to do other things in arts administration. And it was an interesting balance of art appraisal and
Yeah.
and performing arts in general. There were a lot of musicians who wanted to know the business of arts administration, and there were a lot of people who loved art who just wanted to focus
And
on
one
art
particular
appraisal. And I thought that was
gentleman who
interesting.
was making millions selling art. I remember
Hmm.
him
Yeah.
distinctly. He was fascinating.
Yeah, so we were in good company, and I think I'm still connected to some of the people in these classes from on various social media. And I think actually Heidi had a social media group on Facebook, which I think if I scroll through my Facebook groups, I'm still a part of that that channel. But yeah, so we met in that class, and afterwards we went over to some shop that was right there next to the hub where the Oculus is. Where what is that building called? The big white
It's
building,
it's the
the
it's
transportation
the
hub.
Oculus. So you're talking about the path trains.
Yeah, the path Wall Street Station. I don't. That's not Wall
No,
Street
not at
Station. That's
all.
World Trade Station. Yeah, World
World
Trade.
Trade.
Um, but it was completely under construction over there. But there was a couple of restaurants in that area, and we would pop in there, and we would sit after every class and just kind of talk about the good ideas that came from the class and the things that were kind of a waste of time.
Right.
But also, Mitch was talking about this book he was writing, and some Mitch talks about the premise of the book, The Business of Broadway, and I say by the end of this book, we should at least have an understanding of how $15 million is spent on Broadway.
And how we need another 700,000 to a million per week to keep it going.
Yeah, and it's crazy how much money is spent just to get to opening
Yeah.
night. And that's just
Well,
mind blowing.
as we've talked, but since we're bringing the book up again, um, the reason for the book was because I had worked for so many producers who really they desperately wanted to know as much as the managers who they hired, but they didn't. They came
Mm.
from other professions, having made a lot of money, and they thought they could translate their business savvy to the theater. And they were many of them were floundering. Most of them lost their money. And at some point, it was, well, don't you want to learn how to do this and how things work and why there are two, production carpenters on every show and why instead of one and why money is spent this way and how much money ought to be spent on marketing and what's, all what do people get paid in each job. And they seem to have, as an adult, their egos are such they don't want to go to NYU and take a class. So I said, you know what? Why don't I just put the information down on paper and then they can secretly go off and buy the book like they secretly would go off and buy some porn magazine, right? And without anyone knowing it, and they can
Quietly.
find out what they're supposed to pay a general manager or what somebody at an ad agency actually expects a TV commercial should cost. And what the
Hmm.
genius marketing ideas of some of the brilliant producers like David Merrick, pain in the butt that he was, but he had some brilliant things and how that helped keep shows alive when they should have closed, on and on and on. Um, and that's what the purpose of the book was.
Yeah. And it's a great book, and I was so excited to, to even hear that you were writing this book, and in the process of it, you know, to think that anything I was saying to you was actually, um, food for thought as you were
Oh,
writing.
please. Is that, ladies and gentlemen, that is a lot of false modesty.
Oh my
Um,
god. Oh, what? Wait, what do you mean? What do you
well,
mean?
just as we were talking about the students in the classes that I audited having very astute questions, you not only had astute questions, you actually had really astute answers. You may not have had the confidence to know that you knew what you were talking about, but your
Yeah.
instincts plus your experience um, gave you the answers, and that was extremely attractive to want to continue friendship and discussion about, especially being younger than I was. You're the next, generation of what's going to run the theater. So where are we going?
Mm.
Certainly, when I started, there was no social media, there was no internet. We didn't have computers. Actually, I was lucky enough to be in the theater which had the very first computers ever used on a Broadway and off Broadway show. And we had to take
Mm.
lessons at work. It was amazing. Of course, those things were took up your entire desk.
Yeah. And what's also interesting is when you're a small theater company or you're a part of a small theatrical production, whether it be community theater or regional theater, uh, you think you're trying to make things happen with shoestrings and gum, and all of that is kind of the mindset, that you end up carrying through the
Right.
rest of your career, thinking about how to make something out of nothing, how to find connections and resources, from not knowing where to start to
Mm-hmm.
I've got it. And it blew my mind, like, over the years, like, and I think I felt this way. I've said to my partner before, um, if I had encountered the right music teacher in third grade, I would have pursued music more intently, because in second grade I had a music teacher who was very much like Weird Al. I think it would be crazy if it turns out
Yeah.
it was Weird Al, it wasn't him. But he just had that kind of energy, and he had a really fun way of teaching us the elements of music, like the notes and the staff and everything like that. But I remembered sitting in that class, and the teacher was very stern, and you know, there wasn't a mindset of fun in there, so I completely shut down in
Uh,
that
you,
class because I thought everything I knew, everything I had learned before I got to this class was wrong.
that is both the reason we all stick with theater and music and the arts, and the reason and the wrong reason for us to stick with music
Mm,
and theater and the arts. There are so
yeah.
many people who are trying to use, gum to hold two pieces of wood together because they think that's what they're supposed to do. And wasn't it fun in high
Hmm.
school? Well, it's not just a
Yeah.
business; it's also an exciting business, and it's not. I have a ball. I mean, how much? First of all, the most fun any adult can have is having a checkbook with $15 million in it, and you've got signatory power, and they say 8 weeks till your first preview. Go.
Yeah.
I mean, how much
It's like
more
Brewster's
fun can you
Millions.
have? Yes, you sleep
Have you?
and breathe all day and night long for those 8 weeks. That's the problem. But it
Yes.
isn't
Yeah.
about gum, and trying to
Hmm.
spit your way through uh, putting a production together.
Have you ever seen that movie, Brewster's
No,
Millions?
sorry.
Oh, it's a movie with Richard Pryor. He has in order to, I forget the premise, but like in order to keep this money, he has to spend it all in a
Mm.
certain period of
Oh,
time.
yeah, I
So he
remember
just
that
runs around
premise. I
going
haven't seen
crazy.
the movie.
But I know I've always thought about it. I'm like, if I ever come into millions of dollars that isn't earmarked for anything, I'm gonna find a bunch of small
Yeah.
spaces that I can turn into performance venues.
Which, by the way,
We need them.
while we're digressing, I just read today,
Hmm.
and it's a big problem for theater everywhere. But the Edinburgh Fringe Festival is at risk of going
Mm,
under, not because
yeah.
of the cost of theater, because of housing. They
Yeah.
just said
Wow.
that,
Yes.
pandemic, we're all struggling through this, but theater is so, and music too, is so complex. I you take a tour out of a show, whether it's a music concert or whether it's a Broadway show, and people have to be housed and they have to fit within budgets and per diems that unions have determined was enough, and now they're not enough, and there's even less
Yeah.
money to be spent because we're coming out of a pandemic. What do you do?
Hmm.
And it,
I'm sure they've given this some thought, but since Fringe Central is at um, Edinburgh, the University
mhm.
of Edinburgh, I wonder if they've given any thought to, can we take over one of these dorm buildings?
I'm
Like
sure
that
that
would be a great thing for the
right. I'm
society to
sure
spearhead
somebody has investigated it.
and house the artist, because yes, that was a tough thing. I mean, the this is how you know you're not going to Edinburgh. It's April and you haven't booked
Mhm.
airfare yet. If you haven't booked airfare yet, forget it, because you need that first, and then once you book the airfare, then you can figure out where you are going to stay, and yeah,
And now
all of that has to be done
at
so
least
far
what
in
I read
advance.
today in the Stages, which is the UK kind of version of our Variety, I guess, um,
Hmm.
was that there may not be an Edinburgh this year because of the housing. It,
Yeah. I talked to a couple of artists here in Philadelphia who traditionally make their way over to Edinburgh, and they said that
yeah.
they're not going this year either. Yeah, it's just, I mean, and plus there was a lot of uncertainty, and at the time I was speaking to them, um, cases were spiking in the UK, and it was still uncertain that we were even going to be able to fly there, and the airfare.
Yeah.
Oh, the airfare. I mean, the first year that I went to Edinburgh, I flew out of JFK in New York because one, I just said, you know what, I'll go up to New York, I'll spend the day with Mitch, and then I will head to JFK and hop on the plane from there. And I got a good rate. I think it was something like $650
Okay.
round trip, and I think it is still similar. That I mean, you can get it like that from there if you plan ahead, but then I think was it 2019 or 20 late 2018, American Airlines had announced that they would start flying to Edinburgh out from
Okay.
uh, Philadelphia. And since I fly American Airlines, I thought that was a great thing, but I did spend more money. And I was looking at these rates, and they just kept going up, and it was like, oh, $1,100.
Well,
Wait, how
as
long
you
do you
know,
want
we
us to
were
wait?
working on bringing in an actor from LA to Philly just this month. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
it would have been this week,
Yes.
and
Right now, we
right,
would have been
and
in,
the
in
airfare
rehearsals for
went from
readings.
$450 round trip. A week later, it was $1,100.
Yeah.
I
Mm-mm.
mean,
Mm-mm.
and we just keep hearing there's no control. Interestingly enough, Broadway tickets bounce up and down now also, and that's something new.
Yeah.
Well, a number of years old, but it's reasonably new. So it depends on time of year. Also, you go spring break, or you go Christmas, and ticket prices go up. Um,
Yeah.
Never
And
used to
and
happen that
that
way.
is so tough. And that is so tough on arts
That's
organizations
right.
who are planning far enough in advance to do the right thing and have everything in place at the right time. And a lot of stuff that was not factored in. Like, we had no idea gas prices would be what
Right.
they are right now, which compromise everything. Anything that needs gas, now everything goes up.
Well, and
And
that's one of
yeah, it's
the
crazy.
I don't know, maybe Broadway has been a really good lesson or a good classroom for dealing with all these unusual things, because there's always something. We sit around 6 months ahead and we go, oh, wait a minute, Passover is on such and such date. We better not open then. Or, um, or Easter, while we're in the same category. Easter Sunday, maybe that week we shouldn't have a matinee on Sunday, but you have to plan this so far ahead, and your show hasn't even opened yet,
Yeah.
and then you have crises because who knows when a war is happening or a pandemic. We certainly weren't prepared for COVID, but
Hmm.
when 9/11 hit, Broadway did pretty good. They had their backup plan. They knew what they could do, what they couldn't do, and it moved on. Pandemic, unfortunately, real larger
Yeah.
crisis.
Once in a century.
Yeah,
Once in a century, did we even
yeah,
think? I mean, like, who's thinking one day I'm going to prepare right now for the next one? Yeah.
yeah. But
I
here
don't
we
know.
go again,
It's
because
not even
the next
something
one
we
may
think
not
about.
be 100 years from now, and I can
Yeah.
guarantee you, no one is planning for the next one on Broadway. No
Hmm.
one. And the amount of money and the number of people we've lost, the AIDS crisis, the shows may have gone on, but my goodness, we lost half the casts of shows, right? And you had to
Hmm.
recast, and you had to have more understudies, and they were dying. It was, and all you
Yeah.
could do was cry and go to more memorials. One thing after the other. There will be issues, and then if you're a regional theater and you're the only theater in your area, what do you do? Right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I completely understand why, you know, I know a lot of people who are actors, and if you come from production, like if you're a
Hmm.
stage manager or a lighting designer, you can wear multiple hats. You're used to it, but there are a lot of people who don't even want to touch
That's
these
right.
other hats, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
It is not for the faint of
No,
heart.
and yeah, fan of heart, the stress levels, even when you're good at it, are off the charts. And I can say
Yeah,
that now. When I was in the middle of it, I just said, "This is the job. I work hard. I go home. I'm working until
yeah,
2 in the morning. I have to be up. I have to be at the office. The cast doesn't have to be at the show until that night, but I'm at the office in the morning, working all day, getting to the show, hanging out at the show, then going home, working some more. Hey, there are a lot of wonderful things about it. But it didn't occur to me that, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to work 90 hours a week as part of my regular
no.
job. You know,
What about
that would have been
85
a break.
hours?
That's when
No.
you have a holiday that week.
Oh man. Yeah, and the thing is, like, we a lot of us get into it because it is our
Right.
love, it is our passion, and the things that we love, we kind of lose track of how much time we put into them because we love them so much until everything comes crashing down. Hopefully it doesn't. But like once you get that
Yeah.
sense and you realize, wait a minute, I am a bit overwhelmed. I need to take a step back. And sometimes your body will just give out on you and say, you know what? Nope, you're down. You're
Well,
down
yeah,
for the
I
count.
was hoping, and as usual, I'm wrong, but I was really hoping that one of the positive things coming out of the pandemic into a new normal was that we had learned a few lessons of how not to abuse the people we love working with. And that didn't mean you're changing how theater is created and, you know, having to double everyone's salary. I mean, it had nothing to do with that. There were some notions about ways to just let somebody have dinner with their family once a week when some parts of the
Yeah.
profession can't. It just isn't time. And and possibly that
Hmm.
when a show opens and you finally get past the opening night, that you might get a routine that lets you just take a deep breath. And many managers,
Yeah.
certainly, and producers will tell you that doesn't happen. And certainly, if your show isn't a
Hmm.
monster hit, you're scrambling every day to keep it afloat. You're working even harder. So and then I'm going to give you one real example that I think is the worst. Dancers, dancers on shows that have heavy dance routines in them. Some of them get hurt
Hmm.
because they are overworked. They're doing this 8 times a week. They have rehearsals during the day. Some of them are working on unsafe stages with choreographers who don't care because everyone's replaceable. And I
Yeah.
personally know of a number of people who didn't even make it to the age of 30 where they were told by a doctor they could never dance again because of how they were abused.
Mm.
That has to stop. And I thought the pandemic was going to let us get there. And I can already tell it's not.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
guess we all have to, we were hoping unions would have something to say about it. They don't. Anyway,
Yeah. And we were having similar
that's
conversations
right.
8
We
years
were.
ago. as as the book was being crafted, the pitfalls, it's not all the glitz and glamour. There's a lot of behind the scenes of this that it isn't pretty that leads to the magic, uh the takeaway that if you make it to Broadway to see a show, there's a whole lot of work and a ton of people behind everything that you get to see. Particularly if you're attending a musical for 2 hours and 30 to 45
Yeah.
minutes. there's so much involved, and there's a lot of risk. And so, when you think about, like, how did that how did that production even get greenlit for Broadway? You know, there's a lot that went into it behind the
Right.
scenes, and not not to say that us as theater goers need to feel a sense of obligation to support them, but if we can, we should. You know, we have. It's especially, what I say when I'm talking to, my friends, my colleagues. Like, we're in the industry, we support the industry. But we have to let everybody know why this is all worth it,
And
and it
I
is.
almost want to slap myself silly to say it really is worth it sometimes. And
Hmm.
but those times, I do believe that the reason Broadway, why I'm infatuated with Broadway as much as I like theater in general, but the difference between of some wonderful theaters around the country and Broadway is Broadway, you get the best high from the best and the worst
Mm,
low. It is the extremes on
mm,
Broadway. Everywhere else, you have good theater, and you can walk out of there moved
mm.
and intellectually stimulated and saying, worth every penny to sit there and watch it. And it still feels good to work on it.
Yeah.
But on Broadway, I walk out the door and I'm on a high. Of course, when you
Hmm.
find out the next day you're closing because it got
Oh,
bombed and because it shouldn't have been produced in the first place, it's a low. You just killed yourself for almost nothing.
but you're somehow convinced in the process that this is all worth it. And I
Yeah.
know there are many artists out there who have worked on a show that, you know, maybe on that first read, it didn't quite make sense. But as you began to live with it through the rehearsal process, you really start to believe in it. And then you get to your opening night, and then a
Mhm.
critic pans it
And you only need
because they
you
didn't
only
like
need
the piece.
one particular critic to pan it, and there goes the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's, I've seen reviews that said, I've never liked
Hmm.
this play. And okay, forget it. So it doesn't even it doesn't even matter what we've done to it. You never liked the play. So, or you've never liked the musical. So I don't see how we can
Well,
win
and
from
there are
this.
producers and press agents who they don't like, and they won't tell you that.
Yeah.
And of course there are
Ugh.
famous stories where critics, nobody now, I'm not going to drop a name, but at the time, famous critics who drank too much and would fall asleep during the show, and afterwards would write a review describing Act Two when they were asleep for it, and everyone saw
Wow.
them asleep, but they had pre-written the review.
Yes,
So
pre-written.
there goes $15 million. So we're giving the worst scenario, but it's mixed in with the best, right?
Yeah.
The few shows that
Yeah.
you just said that was great, I got to go back and see it again, or I will show up backstage and hang out even if I don't have to, because I love this company. It's been the greatest experience working with them. You get both of those things.
Yeah. One of the things I liked about here in Philly, being a Barrymore voter or
Mhm.
a nominator at one point, nominator, voter, not sure what we are right now, but was the journey home after the show. Where I had time to process what I
Mm.
had just experienced, and then the morning after, when I got to talk to coworkers and colleagues about what I experienced the night before, and I was building sort of my idea of what this production, in how this production felt like, what stood out for me. And even when I started rep radio, my first podcast, I said, I don't see myself as a critic because
Yeah,
how dare I,
good for you.
you, you know, be out here telling everybody whether they should come see the show or not. I feel like I want to I want to be a part of the I'm a part of the conversation. I want you to be a part of the conversation. So come see the show. I want to talk to you about some of the things that stood out for me, whether they were good or bad. I want to talk about those moments. I also want to find the relevance in today. Like I want to draw comparisons about how what we experienced on stage is resonating with what is going on outside of the theater. And so I hope that I've done that over the years with these many conversations. And, but I always carried that with me. I always said, I'm going to find something in here to really enjoy. And, I've definitely sat in theaters going, oh, if they just
Yeah,
had some money,
yeah.
like they could have done so much more with this set design, like, or just did nothing, and not give us anything to really look at and criticize, and just let us focus on the words and the presentation in
Yeah.
general. But sometimes if those things are amiss, then you can't help but
Well,
it just
it's the great variety that theater and theater with music offers us. There are some shows that need
yeah.
that a set and costumes get in the way, and other shows it's all about the
Hmm.
production. If you read it, it's
Yeah,
awful,
yeah.
but when you see it, it comes together, and there's something about the collaboration of visual and auditory and all these different art forms that combine into an
Yeah.
event, and you get both,
Hmm.
but you need money, and that's always been theater's
Yes.
problem. That it's either somebody who has a lot or knows people with a lot of money who gets to decide what we're going to see.
Yeah. So, I hope President Biden's listening to our new podcast,
You think
because
he has
I
a few
think
other things on his mind?
sure, he could spend a few, it's a tight 45, at best. He could listen. This is why the arts are so
Yeah,
important.
but
So throw
except
some money
except
into
the
the
problem is
NEA and
when
all these
when they
other
throw money at it, they give it to the people who already know how to raise money. And so
yes.
I'm going to
Yes.
disagree
Yes.
with you. Uh, the money has got. I mean, there are grants and foundations that try to find a way to reach talent that doesn't have the advantage of knowing money. But at the same point,
Yes.
we all
Yes.
want to be on Broadway. It's just,
Mhm.
there, like I said, there's that high when you have
Mhm.
everyone in every position working on that show has a worthy amount of experience and talent. There's no one to argue with. There's no one trying to slack off. There's no one who doesn't want the show to be a hit. There's no one who's going to argue
Yeah.
if it's going to help the show. There's no one who isn't trying to save a dime if they can. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's like you just walk around the room, you go, hey, tell me about the wigs. It's like that's an art form to
Yes.
itself. Why didn't even think of
Mhm.
it when I was in college that there'd be an art form called wig
Mhm.
designer, right?
Yeah, and theater is full of
Full of it.
nerds who can nerd out about every single aspect
Yeah.
of
Well, and
theater.
actors
Yes.
become costume designers and become ushers and become box office people. You have to have an open mind. If you want to be part of theater, you start one place and you go wherever they let you go, right?
Mhm.
If that's where you want to stay.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, unfortunately, as in New York, you become a waiter. And that's okay. Nothing
Mm.
absolutely wrong with that, especially as you're auditioning and if that's how your process moves. But at a certain point, which is more important? The specifics of your
Yeah.
job or just being in a show working on it? You know,
Yeah. I want to
there you
make
go.
magic. I want to be bigger than I am. I want to make people really care, really
Oh
give a
Lord,
damn.
you're writing a 1940s musical. We're now in 2022. Move on, move
Well, that was
on.
fame.
Yeah,
That was fame. Come on, that was fame. Actually, the first musical I had ever been a part of, my freshman year in high school, was
really.
Fame.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
was an old man by the time that
I
came
was
out.
uh, I was a freshman, and I was an
Wow.
understudy, and the senior who was playing the role of Joe Vegas, he became ineligible grades or something like that, and so I stepped in for him, and I ended up playing that role. But because I'm not Hispanic, we changed the name to Joe Davis.
And my first role in high school, because I never wanted to be an actor, I was working backstage, and the musical was Guys and Dolls, and the actor who was playing the drunken bum got sick and couldn't make it. And
Mm.
the teacher walked up to me and said, "All you have to do is walk out to the other two actors and drop your pants, and then stumble back off stage. That's all you've got to do, and we're covered." I went, and that was my first acting job. Never wanted to do it again.
Oh man. And you're right about you have to be open to whatever sort of opportunities come your way, because I do feel like um, the hats that I've been able to
Mhm.
wear in theater, I've sort of stumbled into them. I have this I've told this story before. I was I was sort of tricked into joining the drama club in high
Mhm.
school. One of the popular kids was being encouraged to join, and he didn't really want to join, so he convinced the drama club that he could get other people to join, and so he dragged us to the theater, and I said, if John's going to be in the drama club, I guess it can't be bad. And then literally saw him exit stage left as we were sitting there. Where is uh, that son of a? Oh my god! So then I was just like, okay, I'll just stay for
Ah,
the
there you
meeting.
go.
And then I got assigned a role. I was assistant sound designer, and then ultimately same guy who had that role in Fame, was ineligible,
Wow.
and I
You owe
became
him a
the
lot.
sound designer. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
dragging me into
No, I'm
theater.
thinking
It was
you owe
the
the guy who's always ineligible a lot.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, I feel like if it wasn't the circumstance, I probably would have felt like all of this was too much
Hmm.
for me. And I'm sure other people can relate to that. Just thinking this is, oh my God, so much is riding on this. I don't know if I can do it. Uh, and sometimes a situation just presents itself
Yeah.
and you show up, and
But
you
you see,
just keep
but
showing up, and
all
and
right,
and
now
that
now
is
me
what
getting
they
serious
say.
again for 1 minute, and the part that bothers me, you're the assistant sound
Mhm.
engineer. Is that the title you think you had?
Yeah, it was like
Did
sound. He
anyone
was,
teach
yeah,
you
sound.
anything before they gave you the job? No. And that's my problem, is
Nope.
that we throw people in it, and we don't give them any education as if it's not important. And guess what? Sound is a
Yeah.
great
Mhm.
career. And and if you can fall in love with other things because you learned a little about it, you can fall in love with sound. But if everyone just says, "Here, push a
Yeah.
button and be so so's assistant," it means nothing.
And who knew this all started out with a rickety mixing board and a
There you
Sony
go.
mini disc, and here we are in the
All right.
virtual studio.
And I just want to, just in case anyone sees, the cup says Chinglish, which is
Chinglish.
David Henry Wong's wonderfully funny Broadway show that was a minor hit. but very much worth it,
Hmm.
and takes place in China, with them trying to
Yeah.
put English signs over the bathroom, and hiring Americans to come in, Brits, to teach them what the correct words are instead of the place where you stoop and poop. Like that's where they're going to put the sign up. They're
Yes.
going, no, I don't think that's the American sign.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, listeners right now, um, there is a video component to this. It just takes a little bit more to put out a video than there is for an audio. So you will hear the audio, but Mitch can see that I am literally sitting in a
Mm-hmm.
green
That's
room.
true.
There's a green space behind me. And I always thought about these as green room conversations. But this, this conversation was many rambling conversations over the years, Mitch and I, over his book, which I am now holding up, The Business of Broadway. Get it where books are sold. And there's a link on
And
the
just
website.
just
And
for the other plug, even though it was published in 2015, um, I have been
mhm,
told by it's still selling. I'm very happy about that
mhm,
because the information in it is so overwhelmingly, I don't want to say generic, but it wasn't about what happened that week. Those aren't the kind of stories. It's
yeah,
about what one producer did to save a show that was dying, what another producer didn't do that made the show close when it was a hit, how the box office deals with unruly customers. It's the general information, so it seems to still be relevant. The only thing that is different are the prices that we pay people. Of course, are slightly higher now because the unions have increases
yeah,
every year. But you can still get a sense. It's unfortunate the people at the bottom end are still making the same amount of money that's in the book, and some of the union
mhm,
jobs they got a little more money along the way. And we have
yeah,
updates
yeah.
every month on the website, Darnell,
Every month since the book has come out, and those are all on emery.com.
and they're
I've
free.
created cleaner links. They're in the section called just learn something. And I will make those links even clearer if you want to visit and go back into the time machine and see all of those notes. I can't believe that we've been updating this book so long. That should be a
Yeah.
version 2 right there. We should just compile it and
Well,
send it to your
unfortunately, the
publisher.
publishing companies are in worse shape. You would have thought because of all the reading being
Yeah.
done during the pandemic, but they actually
Hmm.
have merged and have larger conglomerates, and they have committees making decisions. So I'm not sure they're going to
Yeah.
let me do an update, but we don't know.
Yeah. But now that the business of theater, a working title, is up and running, we will use one of our episodes as an opportunity to update you on the
There you
updates
go.
on the business of Broadway. So we'll do that. But that's
What a
Are we
time.
at time? I think we're at time. Yeah, but we got to go now. Hopefully, these episodes are going to build as we continue as it continues to figure out what it wants to be, you know, and it may be a working title forever, but one day we'll figure we'll figure out what that working title is. But for now, that's just to give you an idea of the many conversations we've had over the years and uh, how a book came out of very similar conversations, not just with me, but with many of the people who are listed in the acknowledgments. I am one of them in the book, The Business of Broadway. And there's so much to talk about. So we also want to hear
Yeah.
from you too. So if you go to the website
Please
emery.com
make sure they know
and
that
click
Emory
the
is
contact link,
spelled.
it's em3ry
Yeah, go ahead,
dot
complicate
com.
everyone's life, Darnell.
And you can click on the contact page and write to us. Tell us what you think. What do you think about the podcast? Let us know, because we would. love to hear your thoughts. What do you want us to talk about? Those are things that we would like to know as well. And sometimes we'll have interviews with other people. So it won't just be me and Mitch. It might be
Mm-hmm.
me and a guest, or it might be Mitch and a guest. But we will create a space to talk about the business. And that's what it is. Because the business continues to go even through all of this. The word of the day, I guess, the past 2 years is resilience.
And hope,
We just have
and hope.
to
There's
be
still hope.
resilient and hopeful
Yeah.
and be hopeful. But until our next conversation, I am
I'm
Darnelle
Mitch
Radford,
Weiss,
and this is the Business of Theater,
a
a
working
working
title.
title. Until next time, we'll see you at the
Take care.
theater. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of The Business of Theater, a working title, with Darnelle Radford and Mitch Weiss. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the podcast with a friend, colleague, or give us some social media love. This podcast is an Emory production. Visit us online at em3ry.com/TBOT. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at em3ryotm.